Hey and welcome to the Creative Odyssey podcast, a podcast about entrepreneurship, creativity, and personal growth by me, Emil Ruth. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. I'm here with Uili, and Joel, how are you?
I'm really good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time and coming on the show. And why don't you just introduce yourself? Who are you in your own words?
Yeah, so I'm Joe Uili. I am a philosopher, and I'm deeply obsessed with vocations and callings and paths, and really just understanding the landscape of someone's deeper calling in this lifetime beyond maybe traditional career paths. And there are a lot of people that are venturing into this unknown space and this unknown territory. It's a really exciting time. And this is an area that I sort of reside in, helping people to navigate the unknown territory.
Yeah, that's great. And it's an important question in this whole movement of new work and work-life balance and finding a calling and having such a variety of different career paths. But you've said you're a philosopher. How'd you got into philosophy in the first place?
Yeah, so it turns out I'm somebody that likes to question a lot of things, and I've just always been geared that way and just always asking why, and why do people have to go to jobs? Why do people have to do things that they don't want exactly to do? And that was sort of one of the basic sort of foundational questions that I started to ask, which ended up revealing to me that I was a philosopher. But I've always been interested in the meaning of life and what is the point, and going down that rabbit hole. And later on in my life, I ended up figuring out that these questions were like fundamental components of being a philosopher. And when I found out I was a philosopher, in terms of like naming it, that was a quite a dramatic experience for myself to say like, oh, this is what I am, and this is the direction I'm meant to be going in. So yeah, I've always been a philosopher. I just didn't consciously know I was a philosopher until later on in my life.
So you, like in contradiction, haven't taken the traditional path and like studying philosophy in university?
So I went to university for psychology, and I got a psychology degree, and I got some electives under my belt in philosophy, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed learning about philosophy. And I was asked to come back to do a master's degree, but at that time I was just like, I'm just not feeling the traditional route. Something's off for me. And I just ended up venturing off and saying, like, I'm not going to do any more traditional study.
Yeah, that's so like on brand for you to not doing a master's degree and like really questioning if this is the only route to become something. And I've had made the question before. I mean, in some cases, it's like very obvious that you cannot call yourself a doctor if you haven't studied medicine or something, or you cannot practice law. But in some cases, what really determines like who you are in case of what you do, and one of the things that mostly came across is all creative fields. So you don't need to study art until you become an artist. So it's something you can go the traditional or the academic route, but you don't need to. So why is it so different in like labeling yourself?
Yeah, I mean, the label is super useful to bring together a lot of different core components of yourself. And the way that I typically will look at labels and say, because I work with career archetypes, so naming a pattern or a behavior that is expressed over a lifetime when it comes to the trajectory of someone's career path is really important. So that someone can say like, okay, this is what my path is, and I can identify with that. One of the issues that happens with traditional education is people will name themselves things that they're not actually deeply connected to. That's not what I would say at the soul level is what they're meant to be doing. And so there ends up being this distortion, this dissonance, this inability to properly walk their path because they have identified with something that they're not. And it's really important to get the correct name for your path in your awareness. But a lot of people don't know exactly what that name is. And so they choose another name because they just want to move forward and want to progress. And that leads to a bunch of different issues.
Like typical corporate hierarchical, getting a promotion and just taking on more responsibility every time, again in a bit bigger paycheck and a longer work week is just one thing that most people found to be like a goal they want to achieve, but maybe they just think because these societies kind of pulled towards it.
Yeah, I typically think of it like a frictionless path, and that it's just sort of it's really slippery to go down that avenue of going and working for a company and then working your way up within that company because the structure has been set. There's a very particular bunch of steps that hey, if I go to university and I get this degree and then I move from this degree to a particular job, then I know what the steps look like. And our vocation and calling doesn't look like that. The steps aren't laid out. It's typically more you're getting pulled towards deeper interests, deeper inclinations. And one way to think about it is like a dog, the sniffer dogs. Have you ever seen these truffle hunting sniffer dogs and they go out in the forest and they have to go on? That's more what a vocation actually looks like. You're going off track. And I know that there's a lot of cliches out there that's like go on the unbeaten path or the road less traveled.
Yep.
But it really is this, how do I get away from the structures that I'm being given in order to properly pursue my vocation? Because the vocation just doesn't exist within those structures, at least not in the way that I've seen it play out with people that I've worked with. And it didn't work out in my path like that either.
Yeah, makes total sense, especially that people would come up to you that are not satisfied with like following the first few steps on a like predictable path and seeing this is not really it. So do you think on the flip side that there are people who are actually satisfied with a very predictable, clear path, or do you think that they lack the awareness of finding a true calling?
Yeah, I think that there are people out there that are meant to be within those paths. I just think that the number is a lot smaller than what it is out in the world today. There are very particular kinds of people, and also typically in their sort of life, they've got other things that require their attention that seem to be the development of their life. Things like relationship is a really big theme for them, or something like their family is a really big theme for them. And that just seems to like take and pull them in that direction. But for the majority of people, I do think most people are on temptation paths that are not the thing, and that these structures cause them to miss out on what their calling actually is. And I think it's tragic.
Yeah, I can see that, and I think this is one of my biggest fears, to not follow my true vocation. But as you said, for some people it might be the family or the relationship. Do you think that these social structures can also be some kind of vocation for some people?
Yeah, definitely. And oftentimes people, when we get hyper interested in those topics, it ends up being a major theme for their vocation. So if they're getting really into relationships, or if it's a big pain point for them, it often ends up getting woven into their vocation if they put attention on it. And because it's such a deep interest, there's a real like holding power there. And that's another thing that you need in your vocation. You need like a long holding power, because our interests will fade off, especially people that have many different interests. And so we need these deeper interests that are going to stay there for the trajectory of our path.
Yeah, definitely. And before we get into these many different interests and the aspect of like being multi-passionate, do you think that being like a full-time caregiver is something that's really deep within a calling as well? Just because you're based more in like the career thing?
Yeah, definitely. Somebody that wants to care for people, someone that knows their entire life. They want to be a mother or a father. That is a really important piece. I think that there is definitely a distinction to be made, though. So if that person is focused purely on being a mum, being a dad, but then they're also doing a job that they absolutely hate for the majority of their life, then I'm still like, well, that's a big problem. And so we have to figure this out. There's still a way to be able to care for your family and walk your path in this lifetime, because those 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for the rest of your life for 40 plus years, they matter too. And so we can't just sacrifice all that time and for doing something that we don't love for our families.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big chunk of your life, and that's why before we get into the other thing, and that's why I thought that like a work-life balance is something hard to kind of build, because I don't really want to separate the work that I do from my life. If I'm not alive when I'm working, these are not like super separate for me.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really working on is restoring the vocation back in people's lives, restoring it as like a thing for people to have as a place where they can say, like, this is really important. Because you will get these people that say, well, hey, I need to still live. Hey, I still need to have fun with people. Hey, I need to still go and hang out with my friends and all of this stuff. My point is that, okay, but the majority of the time that you're living is taken up by work in your adult life. And you're going to tell me that your adult existence is going to be taken up with work that you do not love, then I would be questioning that and saying, like, is that worth your mortality? And from my point of view, no, we got to figure this out, and we got to figure this out now. And other people, they want to push it and push it and push it because it's painful to face it. It's painful as well to go through these transformations of transitioning from one career path or one known path into a domain of the unknown. And yet that's where the vitality is. That's where the path is. That's where the life is. And a lot of my work is pushing people off the cliffs and be like, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, it makes me wonder that I see the necessity, but once you have like, for the lack of a better term, like the red pill of changing your life's calling and actually taking full responsibility for your life and your career, then it's hard to go back to like a more safer job or the safer kind of studies you could make. Just imagine someone who's like, I don't know, 18, trying to get an arts degree, and everyone's telling them that it's useless, basically. So what is for people just starting out and finding their path?
Do you mean that people in the beginning, when they are 18, how should they best approach going about finding what their path is?
Yeah, and the confidence to go their own path.
Yeah. I think that one of the very first things we have to understand is that a lot of people have previous conditioning beliefs, especially around the family unit, society, and people are going to say, like, hey, you shouldn't pursue that. Like, take this art example. You shouldn't go ahead and pursue art and creativity because you're not going to make money doing that. Now, we know that in our current economy, many different creative people can make lots of money pursuing their paths.
Yeah.
And so for anybody young out there that's listening, you want to go and look at evidence in the world of people that are actually doing it. So you basically take someone's belief, and you go, okay, there's the belief. I'm going to go and look and see in the world and see if this is true. You'll quickly find, like, oh, this person's has a creative career, this person has a creative career, this person has a creative career. And so it just stacks up against them. You get so much evidence against this belief that you can't help but start to break down the belief within yourself. So that's one approach that I would tell people to do. Go and stack up evidence against it. A lot of people in the beginning told me that I couldn't pursue philosophy full time. Even my boss, when I was leaving my insurance gig, because that's what I was doing before I left to go become a philosopher, he basically sat me down and he cautioned me and started to say, well, you could actually go and do some consulting in this company and this company, and you'll be easily on the 6-figure mark, and you'll have a very happy life, and you can do this kind of thing on the side.
Yeah.
But internally, I'm like, this is off. This is incorrect. And so I started to look and say, like, hey, is there people out in the world that are pursuing their own thing? I didn't have any philosophers to go off of, but I could still see that people in the world were able to pursue their own thing online. And I just was like, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that one. I'm not going to do this one. And there's so much evidence against that belief that, it was able to be questioned.
Yeah, good point. And one thing that you just mentioned is this doing one thing on the side. Do you think a vocation or a calling really causes you to get dragged full in and like taking full time into the thing that is your calling? Or do you think building on the side might be just the right path for someone else, maybe?
So I think it's really important to distinguish between hobbies, jobs, careers, vocations. So at the bottom, we've got hobbies. These are things that are just pleasures. You don't have to become an expert at it. You don't have to become amazing at it. Like you can, but they're for you and they're for your pleasure. It's just yours. And then we have jobs. These are things that you just do for money in order to survive. Nobody should be doing jobs. Unfortunately, we have many people doing jobs, but this is horrible. We don't want people to have jobs. Career is like this trajectory over time. And going through that trajectory over time, it's like, because in the etymology of the word career is course. It's an unfolding course. And so we can think about careers like a trajectory. And so when people are building their careers, they're building up a higher trajectory. They're rising in the material existence. A vocation is our higher calling. It comes from something beyond us, whether you are spiritual or not. It's something that is beyond. It's just like internal. It's visceral. It's deeply ingrained. Like we just get pulled for reasons that we don't quite understand.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to should I pursue a vocation and how should I go about it, it's different for different people based on where they're at. For some people, like going all in and being under high pressure and high stress and quitting their job within 4 weeks, it works. I've seen it work. But I've also seen people do very, very slow transitions over like 2-3 year periods where they're building their thing on the side and then they slowly maneuver into that. But your vocation exists whether the career exists or not. It exists whether you're making money on it or not. And so the question is, how fast do you want to bring your vocation into existence where you're making some sort of income? Obviously, we're talking about within the structures of modern society where we do need money. That might change later on in the future. But understanding those distinctions between hobbies, jobs, careers, vocations is really important to understand how fast you move.
So that's the very important distinction that you make is can you make a living out of it? So there's one hard, in this case, distinction to be made is do you love it? Does it feel naturally to you? Is it like your thing? You're excellent at it. You feel you're identified with it. But the main distinction is, can you make a living? Not just maybe side gigs and make a bit money out of it, but can you really make a living? What you say, this is the major distinction, right?
So I'd say on the foundation, you need to get the soul correct. And what I mean by that is once you really step in or like if you could imagine someone like with their feet on a solid foundation, if you have that soul level, like this is what I'm meant for, this is what I should be doing with my life, then there's always a way to figure out how to make the money. The money can come secondary. And so I don't believe in this sort of thing of having to choose between soul or money. I think that when you choose the soul, inevitably the money can come, and that there's always a way to figure it out. And then it's just a matter of figuring out what that looks like for you. But I don't think it's an either or thing. I think it's like a layered, if you think of a layered visual where the foundation is the soul and the next layer is the money.
Yeah. That sounds like something I've read, like a tweet from Naval Ravikant. I don't know the exact words, but it's similar to either you're focused on the money and then you go the money route, or you focus on your passion and on your curiosity and build from that on. But don't choose both, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, pretty similar.
Yeah. Makes me think, because intuitively you would say you want a bit of both, something you really love and something you can still make money out of it. But makes me think of compromises a lot, and it doesn't make sense to compromise to a point where you have actually like no edges. If you imagine like your calling being like a square, and you're compromising so much that you just end up with another shape, like a circle. So it doesn't make sense to kind of roughen the edges so much that you have something else completely.
Yeah, definitely. And I've witnessed a lot of people as well where they try to go both ways and then they get none. It's that whole proverb of the man who chases two rabbits gets none. So yeah, there is something definitely to that. And I'm someone that is always on the soul side first. I'm like, soul led is the way to go. And then we can figure out the money. Money is definitely important, but I'm not willing to sacrifice it for my soul.
Yeah, that's a very important baseline, to never sacrifice your soul, and at least find something you're not particularly against with, or just kind of waiting your time and being like locked in to a room on a desk and doing something mindless, and you've become to feel less human over time and wait for the weekend to begin. That sounds horrible to me.
And I think people are very aware of that. I think people that do feel that level of decay, do feel that level of, I know I'm meant for something more. I know there's something out there for me that isn't this. And one of the issues is that people don't know how to access that point of like what the thing is. And so because they don't have an awareness of what it is, they just end up defaulting onto what they're currently doing.
Yeah. I have the feeling that it also affects the rest of your life. If you're doing a job you don't like, it's dreading, and then your evenings become much more mindless as well. I've seen this when the time I've worked part-time besides my studies, and I've had a time where I worked more than I did my studies at the time, and I feel like done. So I've just uninspired, a bit more lazy, less creative at the time. I feel like a dreading, boring job can also negatively affect the rest of your life.
Just all areas. I mean, health, relationships. I remember when I was going to my insurance gig before I knew what I wanted to be pursuing, and just waking up and just feeling how heavy I was because I just didn't want to even move forward. And, to be Tuesday. And I'm thinking, like, really? I just want to go and do something else. And that pain is something that I just think can be erased in the world. There's just so many people, so many stories. It's everywhere where people are just saying, like, this isn't working. This isn't how we should be living. So everyone is aware of it, but it's a matter of getting everybody to start moving in a direction where we're no longer accepting jobs that don't bring in like the humanness. Don't give us that. Hey, I'm alive, and I've got probably roughly like 80 to 100 years to be on Earth. Do I really want to be spending those years in some office, in some cubicle, on the computer, on Zoom meetings that I don't want to be on? I was like, no.
No. I've come even yet to the point that I'm not even able to do that. That I feel like even physical pain when I'm doing something that I don't like, and it's something that's even getting in my way sometimes, that I'm very quick to stop doing projects or something else that I feel that are off. And this is something where I have struggled with, like, should I be more persistent at this point and a bit more patient because I want to do it, but it feels kind of off right now? Or do I generally feel this is off and this is not me? So this is something I struggle sometimes with.
I always think of it through this lens of vocation. So our vocation is a calling, something that is transcendent. It takes us higher towards something that we're meant to be pursuing. Oftentimes we'll view our work through the lens of how do I feel, or how does this affect my customers, clients, fans, audience, the external. And so we're often on this horizontal trajectory of like me and other. And so the way to start to think about this, at least the way that I've found that helps people, is we start to think about the vocation up here. Like, what does the vocation need from you? And so if doing these projects takes you closer towards your calling, then maybe it is a power through moment. But if it's taking you away from your calling because you're deteriorating inside and you don't want to keep showing up because it's just killing you, then maybe you don't do those projects. But it's about being in relationship to what your vocation, your calling is, really connecting into it, rather than it being too heavy on the like, how do I feel? Or how does my market, customer, audience feel? And by doing that, it starts to strengthen the relationship with you and where you're going and what you're meant for.
That's a good point. Makes me, I will definitely remember that next time I feel a bit off and not my calling. And maybe if something is off in like the in the bigger view, to sort of say that, then maybe we need to, or I need to adjust the setting, the general setting of the project, or whatever the calling might be.
Yeah, and you always have that in your control. You can always change it. You can always, and a lot of people get stuck in like, well, these people expect these things from me, or even I expect this of myself. And just taking back ownership and saying like, okay, this is my calling, this is my path, and I can adjust and tweak it as much as I want. And that will also give you a sense of empowerment as well. That's why I do this all the time. I'll be like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And then as I start going through it, I start to realize like, oh, no, that's not quite on point. And so I need to dial it back because my vocation requires it.
Yeah. And it definitely is important to kind of change that, because in the short term, if I talk about like my main project is this podcast right now, and every time I kind of feel like now I kind of started to establish myself and have a regular schedule, and then sometimes this feeling comes up as like, now I have to be consistent because that's what I wanted to build. And this is something very hard for many creatives. When they start, they have like no boundaries, no responsibility, not even for themselves. They can just explore. But the moment they kind of establish something, they feel the need to kind of prove that they can consistently do the work, even if they want to. But the feeling of that is now required from them to kind of have a consistent output. Even especially creative people have like you will probably know that they usually don't produce like a factory, but more ups and downs, and have like phases of reflection, and then they do a bunch of stuff in like a short time. Creatives are very unpredictable, and that if you can put creatives in sort of a category, which is a very wide category.
And it is, absolutely. And you're definitely going to have a spectrum of different ways that people approach it. I mean, you mentioned it, as you said, creatives don't want to, they don't produce like a factory. And so my response to this kind of thing is like, so stop producing like a factory. It's like, create your path in such a way where you're able to make changes, make moves, make pivots, create your structure in such a way that, you know, every 3 months or something, you have a big refresh, or you do try something different, like build it into your path, because that's how you're already naturally geared. And by building that in, it's like the creative person is like, okay, in a couple of weeks I get to do this new thing and I'm excited for that, and then it starts to re-energize and revitalize the path. So it's really important. You yourself are creative. People I work with are hyper creative as well. To have that sense of like, okay, when's the next new thing? When are we going to push the next boundary? When are we going to expand? Otherwise, you're right, it's going to feel like another 9 to 5 job. It's going to feel like I'm working in the factory, I'm producing. Even if I got to choose the choice at the start, then I just become my own sort of manager over time. And that's just taking the old model and just like slapping it on into the future. And it just doesn't work with the nature.
Mm. Yeah. Made me have like a realization at this point where I'm almost at like 40 episodes, and now it feels more like routine, and I'm still excited, especially because I want to talk to the people I'm talking to. This is what gets me going, and I always try to find time to make it. And then I will just need to kind of restructure and manage and do some creative side tasks that make it more exciting in the long run, and not knowing that I will just talk to people and then I upload the episode, and then I talk to another person and then just upload the episode, because you feel this, the way I'm telling you this feels redundant, even though I really enjoy doing the podcast, but not doing like repetitive tasks in general.
Yeah. I mean, any way that you can bring in novelty, vitality, creativity into your work is going to feed you. If you are creatively inclined, and I don't just say this to you, I say to anybody that is listening, if you are creatively inclined, like, you need to have creativity in your work. It needs to be in there, or you will wither away. And we need to avoid that at all costs. And so build it into the foundation. And say, even though everybody out there is saying like, be consistent, have a rigid format, and just do it again and again and again, like, question that advice. Ask why. Do I actually need to do that? Or is there some other people out in the world who are doing it a little bit differently? Like, really start to venture out of these beliefs or these, tactics, and question them. Question them for yourself, and you'll step into unknown territory, and you might find different things that you're like, oh, okay, I'm doing it differently, and nobody told me this, but suddenly I'm in this unknown domain, and I'm able to still be creative, and it's still working, and I'm still able to consistently bring out stuff. Like, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. Yeah, venturing into that.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry for the listeners if this advice was very tied to me personally, but I think a lot of these things can be found in any kind of project. But let's get a bit more broad this time to bring up like the foundational method of your work is the career archetypes. Maybe you can just briefly introduce the different archetypes so we can know or identify.
Yeah, so I like that you've mentioned that, because so I have a career archetype system. It's an approach, and it's an approach to bring out what your calling is. And you might know different career archetypes in the world, like artist, philosopher, florist, perfumer. We can go into the spiritual domain, psychic, different healers. There are all these different archetypes. Now, a lot of the people, when I start working with them early on and they ask me about my career archetype system, they typically will say, is it 16 types? Is it 32 types? Is it 8? Like, how many career archetypes are we talking here? And they're always surprised when I tell them that there's hundreds, probably thousands. And what ends up, the way that I approach it isn't through this, like, okay, here's a personality test, and here comes your career archetype that gets spit out at the end. I take people through an unearthing process whereby they go through different perspectives on themselves to come to their own realization of what the name is. And because of that, what ends up happening is that students end up bringing out career archetypes that no one has ever heard of before. Maybe they have heard of them before, but they're in different cultures. And there are just hundreds. We have lists inside of our community of all these different career archetypes. So unfortunately, I can't give you like the 5 or 6 archetypes to identify with.
Mm.
But what I can say is there are definitely different categories. There are creative categories. There are more like intellectual categories. There are creative categories. But underneath those, there are many different differentiations of archetypes.
So there might be even more archetypes that are towards to more analytical thinking, or like people who are more like scientific, academic. That might be also a kind of career archetype, right?
Yeah, definitely. People will have a combination of, personality, interests, their life history, like life mythology, the different hindrances that they've gone through on their path, all end up forming what is going on with them and their particular path in life. So it gets very, very specific to the individual, as opposed to a more general archetype.
You probably tested out for yourself. What is your career archetype?
Philosopher. Yeah.
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 Okay.
It's very like vanilla.
just plain philosopher. Yeah, that's nothing to complain about. Yeah, makes me wonder what my type is, because I've seen a lot of your posts on Instagram, and first off, they are very aesthetically pleasing. It's nice on the eye to see the posts, and from content-wise, I can definitely recommend reading them. I always feel inspired when I've seen these. And how did you get into like posting on Instagram more and building on that side?
So, I mean, I'm a millennial. I was always posting online along with all of my friends and all that kind of thing. And there was a switch where I started to take it more seriously when I started to leave that 9 to 5 job insurance gig. And I believed that I could in some way connect with people online where I could help them. And in the beginning, I was trying to help people to find their purpose. And so everything was centered around purpose. And the way that I was approaching Instagram was just sharing how I found my purpose. And that's really how I got started, just posting how I found my purpose, my story, introducing myself, and just seeing if people connected with that. And it was just kind of as pure as that.
Yeah. One of the posts I've seen that particularly caught my eye and kind of sparked the idea to make me want to talk to you is about being multi-passionate, because this word alone, these kind of word or two words make me feel like so I could so much identify myself with that. And how do you describe the term?
So multi-passionate is just simply somebody that has multiple different passions. They're pulled in many different directions. They get interested in many different things. They're typically very, very curious people. And so that term is just simply used to identify that level of curiosity in many different directions. And it doesn't go away. It continues on throughout your life. Which is a really important thing to understand when it comes to pursuing your calling, that it's going to be there. Even when you try to focus on like one thing, it's still just going to rear its head and be like, no, there's this other interest over here.
So you never stop being like multi-passionate. And it's not like you're multi-passionate and then you find the one thing and you stop being multi-passionate.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
No, it's similar to what you've said in, I remember I wanted to say that you're also doing YouTube videos, which are also pretty good. I've downloaded some to watch on the flight, and sorry for taking a nap, but it doesn't have anything to do with the content. They were great videos, but it's just me on flights. But still, being like this entropic in my content that I consume, being chosen to be one of my downloaded videos is something very, very good, because I have so much on my plate and so many different fields where I look for for content in any kind of direction. So it makes me very curious. And yeah, it's good to know that being multi-passionate doesn't stop, because then I don't need to feel guilty if this feeling, or this yeah, it's more like a feeling, never really stops, and being like, there's something else that's caught my eye, and now I'm focusing a bit more on something, but I really want to get still into like psychology and philosophy, which really interests me as well. And I also have this where because I'm studying entrepreneurship, and I'm really into like design thinking and strategic design and something like that. And it's not really set in stone, but I really like to be like a generalist. And I've heard the term like being a polymath. I mean, it's a high stake to call yourself a polymath, but I really like the idea of it.
It's really interesting, the multi-passionate sort of, I don't know if you want to call it a trait, but having that within yourself, and you have to walk your path in such a way where that is allowed in, it's allowed to exist, and being able to go and venture into different domains is what actually helps to feed the path and helps to make the path elevate. And so there is this really strong narrative in the world where you have to focus on one thing, and you should be focused on one thing. And if you're not focused on one thing, then you're doing it wrong. And yet there are so many paths out there. If you just go and observe nature, right? There's different people in different periods of history who have walked paths in such a way where they have been pulled in many different directions. The classic example is Da Vinci. And we do not have Da Vinci at the level Da Vinci is at. We do not have the Mona Lisa without him stepping into anatomy and looking and cutting up bodies. We don't have Da Vinci if he's not so interested in looking into horses and just watching horses and watching birds and drawing. Like we don't have that level of excellence. And so that's not to say that people that are inclined to focus on one thing need to focus on many things. It's just to say that we have different natures, and we need to accept our nature. And then when we accept it, we can build it into our path, and our path becomes better because of it. And so a lot of the times when I'm out there talking about, hey, everybody, multi-passionates, it's okay to be a multi-passionate. When I'm saying that kind of thing, it's coming from seeing people that start to weave their passions into their path, elevating because of it. And yeah, I can't harp on more about that.
Yeah, it's for me personally, it's like a very important thing to hear, because it's reframing from more like being distracted and not knowing where you want to go. And it feels sometimes like you're not walking a path, but you're walking like 5 different paths at the same time. And you don't really feel like a direction because you're looking at different directions. But seeing like being multi-passionate as more of a trait or a specific power or superpower, if you want to call it like that, but not like something that is pulling you away from your path, but maybe it's just part of yourself.
And the funny thing is that if you do push that side away from yourself, you do go off track, because there's this other part of yourself that hasn't been integrated into how you're meant to walk your path. And so it's a really fun, if you are a multi-passionate person, you really do have to bring that in, and not only bring that in, but like it needs to be emphasized because it's a part of your gift. And so the more that you can bring that in, the better your path goes. The thing about getting split and scattered, that is important to think about, and oftentimes you do have to relocate or recenter yourself on your vocation. So it's like, okay, what's my calling? Okay, and that is important, but that doesn't mean that you have to pick like one subject or one skill, and you can't do anything else. It's like that's not true.
So you're kind of allocating like alongside like a North Star, maybe something that is pulling you, and everything else is kind of hovering around of it to power up yourself or power up your skill set, or gently. I think that I'm pretty like action orientated. So if I want to get a project done, I have a very, I don't know if this is like impatience, but I really want to do it. And then I just kind of get through every barrier I can possibly can myself until I get there. So on taking this podcast as an example again, it's like I'm not waiting for someone to design the graphics, or I'm not waiting for someone to cut and edit and host the interviews. Host obviously, as in like the hosting platform, not me talking. But I'm really like, I want to do the whole thing because I want to get it out there and not wait on so many steps and people. So this is kind of where like a multi-skill set comes in pretty naturally.
Definitely, definitely. I think one of the cool things, like you mentioned, you're studying entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship will naturally allow multi-passionate people to thrive, and one of the reasons for that is there's so many different problems that are in so many different domains that will pop up all the time in front of people, and so they'll need to draw on a different skill set. An example that comes to mind is the guys from Airbnb, the Brian Chesky and the people that started that company. And so they're they're trying to start that company. Obviously, they know a little bit about business and software, and then they have to go to people's homes and start taking photographs. And so the interesting thing there is like, well, okay, who knows how to use a camera? Well, that's suddenly it's like a different skill. It's a different. They're in the domain of photography, and so there are all these different problems that will pop up that multi-passionate people can like be like, oh, okay, I can kind of solve this, and then another problem from a different domain. Okay, I can kind of solve this. So it is a very useful thing for people that are entrepreneurs.
Definitely, or the skill of knowing how to solve problems if you're not able to do it yourself. It's not being like passive when it comes to solving or creating something, but you're really actively getting help or getting whatever kind of resource you need to get something done. I think for me, at least, this is one side where I find the definition of like entrepreneurial creativity is you're just doing something and you find whatever is needed to do something, and make money out of it. That is the entrepreneurial part. And I think most often, or definitely all the time, the best entrepreneurial scenarios inquire something that is win-win.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. As you were saying that, I was actually reminded of Charlie Munger, the investor.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he mentioned was that, you know, he's obviously in investing and understands investing at a very, very, very deep level. But then he would go into different topic areas and start trying to understand the big ideas and then bring them with him to apply in his own field. So much so that he ended up making contributions to psychology in the areas of like influence and stuff. And this is another thing that happens with multi-passionate people where they can just accidentally step into other areas because they're trying to, solve problems and find big ideas, but also have their own toolkit of ideas and find new, interesting insights. And that's another gift that they have. And that's another reason why they should be multi-passionate in the world and why we should continue to like say, hey, this is a great thing. This is a great ability that you have.
Yeah. I think the moment you've kind of said it made me realize that all people should be multi-passionate to an extent. Maybe some are exceptionally multi-passionate. I would call myself that as well. But I think many people would just say no, would be a very weird way to approach a life where you just do your profession and you're unable to do anything else, like cooking or preparing stuff or being interested in how your plants are growing in the backyard or something like that. would be a very like robotic life if you just do one thing and then you just go back home and do nothing that kind of excites you.
Yeah, it dehumanizes us.
Yeah.
And it's like an outgrowth of industrial thinking where they just plug us into particular areas of specialty. And, Adam Smith famously said, like, hey, this is probably a bad idea, but it's great for efficiency. And I think that culture is slowly growing out of this and starting to point at different directions because they realize like that way of life doesn't quite work. And we're right in the middle of it all, whereby people are starting to say like, hey, there's a different existence, but what is that existence? You hear like people talking about post-capitalism. What does this look like? And we're right in this. We don't quite know what it's like, but we know that we want something different than how it's been.
It's an exciting time to be in, and it resonates with a lot of people. You probably know Paul Millard and Pathless Path, and you definitely know Visi Andre and his Sovereign Artist kind of program. It's just another idea of how to approach a life that is not centered on productivity alone, but something else entirely.
Mm-hmm. And I am very excited about the future to see because the vocation for me exists whether there's a career or there isn't a career, whether UBI, robots, and everything comes in and we're just sort of left with our hands in our pockets, like, what do we do? Well, our vocation still exists after that. And we are entering into a whole new world.
Yeah, that's very cool. To kind of wrap this up, and what I always want to know is what books are my guests recommending. I've seen you have a beautiful bookshelf behind you, and I'm just trying to read through the through the webcam what you've got there. But what are maybe some books you might recommend, and in general, and maybe for the topic matter?
So there's heaps of different books. I get really nerdy and into like very specialty books that I don't think everybody is going to be wanting to jump into. Like I love Jung's Psychology and Alchemy. People see that as like a torture chamber in reading that. So I'm like, okay, I kind of get that. In terms of books that I have recommended, I love recommending Mastery by Robert Greene. I think it is one of the best attempts at trying to explain how to find your path that is very like accessible to people. I love Women That Run with Wolves. This is a very good book on intuition. And I think that intuition is very misunderstood by people. And, if you're a dude out there and you hear Women That Run with Wolves and you're like, no, I'm not going to read that because it's like women. I promise you, it is an amazing book on intuition and something to think about when it comes to your path and the nature of how that works. And I really love... what is it called? I think it's called Michael Ruhlman's The Soul Chef. Something like that. And it's about mastery underneath, but it's about 3 different versions of pursuing being a chef. And it really teaches the different approaches. So one approach is a very traditional approach. One approach is very much like, I'm just going to be hyper creative and I'm going to ignore all traditions and all teaching. And another approach is this guy that goes around the world learning from all these different locations and then brings it back into New York in his late 40s. And he has a really late start in pursuing his vocation. But it's one of the best books that I've found if you're wanting to understand different approaches into how to walk a path, because there are so many different ways that work, so many different ways that... and there are hindrances in all these different paths as well. And so just understanding what these look like is very, very useful. Those are the 3 on the top of my head at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. And maybe 4 if you count Jung in, but still. Yeah. I always encourage to kind of venture off and go to whatever is on their mind. But at least 2 of the titles I've never heard of, and then I'm always happy that got some new books I can add to my endless reading list. Maybe found the time, but I think this is a topic that really is very like relevant to me at the moment. So I get into the books and really try to share what you're doing in your work. But thank you for taking the time. It was a very good conversation, and I will let you know how this is going. And yeah,
Cool.
then
You're welcome.
see you.